I was fired in exactly 7 minutes. Moments after securing a renewal everyone claimed was safe. My boss smiled like she had just won a chess match, until her phone started vibrating with calls from those very clients. She failed to realize that while contracts belong to the company, trust belongs to the person. When she cut me from the system, she also severed the lifeline for 14 clients worth $220 million. My name is Emery Flores, and I was dead to Meridian Crest Partners before I even sat down in the ergonomic mesh chair. The conference room was nicknamed the Aquarium because of its floor-to-ceiling glass walls, designed to project transparency in a company that thrived on opacity. Today, however, the blinds were drawn tight, turning the space into a suffocating gray box. The air conditioner hummed with a low, aggressive vibration that rattled the loose HDMI cable on the table. Veronica Slade sat at the head of the table. She was the revenue director, a woman who treated human beings like lines of code in a buggy software update, something to be debugged and deleted to make the system run faster. Next to her was a woman from HR, whom I had met exactly twice in 12 years. I did not need to see the laptop screen angled slightly away from me to know what was happening. I could read the bold, sans serif header on the document sitting face down in front of the HR rep, termination. It is a strange physical sensation. Being fired. You expect anger or panic. But for me, it was a sudden, absolute coldness. It started in my fingertips and moved up my spine. I placed my hands flat on the table to stop them from trembling. Not out of fear, but out of a sudden, violent surge of adrenaline. Have a seat. Emery, Veronica said. Her voice was smooth, polished to a high sheen that hid the jagged edges underneath. It was the voice she used when she was selling a vision she did not believe in. I sat. I did not speak. I learned a long time ago that in moments of crisis, the person who speaks first loses. We are restructuring the Strategic Accounts Division. Veronica continued, clasping her hands on the table. Her manicure was perfect, a sharp, blood-red color that looked dangerous. We have looked at the metrics, and we have decided to pivot towards a more automated, volume-based model. You are talented, Emery, but you are no longer a fit for the new direction. There it was. The line, not a fit. It is the corporate equivalent of a silencer on a gun. It kills you quietly without leaving a mess for the legal department to clean up later. I just closed the renewal for the logistics portfolio this morning, I said, my voice steady. That is $40 million over 3 years. The signature ink is not even dry. Veronica smiled. It was a tight, practiced expression that did not reach her eyes, and we appreciate that contribution. It is a great note to end on. But this is about the long-term vision. We need scalability, not overhead. Overhead, that was what she called me. 12 years of flying red-eye flights to salvage deals, of calming down furious CEOs at 2 a.m, of memorizing the birthdays of clients' children, all of that was just overhead to Veronica Slade. The HR representative slid a thick envelope across the table. This contains your separation agreement. Emery, it outlines your severance package, which is generous, provided you sign the attached non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreements. We need your badge and your company devices immediately. It was happening in fast forward. 7 minutes. That is how long it took to dismantle a career. I reached into my bag and pulled out my laptop and my company phone. I placed them on the table. The plastic clattered against the wood, a sound that seemed deafening in the quiet room. I unclipped my badge from my blazer. The photo was from when I was 25, fresh-faced and eager to prove myself. I looked at that younger version of me one last time, apologized silently to her, and slid the plastic card across the table. It has already disabled your email access, Veronica said, checking her watch. She was bored. She was already thinking about her lunch reservation or her afternoon Pilates class. Security will escort you to the lobby. We will box up your personal effects and courier them to your home address by tomorrow. They were treating me like a contagion. Contain, isolate, remove. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but I kept my chin high. I would not give Veronica the satisfaction of seeing me break. I would not cry. I would not beg. I would simply vanish, just like they wanted. Then, I felt it, a vibration against my thigh, my personal phone. It was tucked deep in the pocket of my wool trousers. It buzzed once, then twice, then a third time in rapid succession. I ignored it. I turned to the door. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The rhythm was frantic. It was not a spam call or a family member checking in. I knew that rhythm. It was the rhythm of a crisis. "Emery," Veronica said, her voice sharpening slightly. "Please leave the premises immediately." I paused with my hand on the cold metal handle of the door. The phone buzzed again, demanding attention. Instinct is a hard thing to kill, even when you have just been terminated. I pulled the phone out. The screen lit up with a notification from a number I had memorized 6 years ago. It was the CEO of the healthcare conglomerate responsible for nearly 15% of Meridian Crest's annual revenue. "Emery, where are you?" I stared at the screen. The timestamp was 1 minute ago. Another message popped up instantly. "Cameron just walked into the implementation meeting. He has the wrong slide deck. He is talking about Q3 pricing we explicitly rejected last week." I looked up. Veronica was watching me. Her eyes narrowed. She saw the phone. She saw the hesitation. For a second, a flicker of unease crossed her face. She knew who had my personal number. She knew that in the world of high-stakes account management, the official channels were for contracts, but text messages were for truth. A third message arrived. "We do not sign if you are not running this. Call me." I slid the phone back into my pocket. I looked at Veronica. I looked at the HR rep who was busy cataloging my returned equipment. "Is there a problem?" Veronica asked, her tone icy. "No," I said, and for the first time since I entered the room, I smiled. It was a small, faint thing, but it felt like drawing a sword. "No problem at all. Good luck with the new direction." Veronica. I walked out of the aquarium. I walked past the open-plan bullpen where junior associates sat hunched over keyboards, typing away their youth. I walked past the break room where I had consumed thousands of cups of stale coffee while putting out fires that Veronica did not even know existed. The security guard, a man named Marcus, whom I bought donuts for every Friday, looked at me with confusion as I walked toward the elevators without my badge. He started to say something, but I just gave him a nod. He let me pass. I stepped out of the building and the Chicago wind hit me like a physical blow. It was November, and the air cut through my coat, stinging my cheeks. The sky was a flat, oppressive gray, the color of wet concrete, the city noise, the sirens, the honking taxis. The rattle of the L train overhead rushed in to fill the silence that had been ringing in my ears. I walked a block away, putting distance between myself and the glass tower of Meridian Crest Partners. I found a concrete bench near a small, withered park and sat down. I took a deep breath, letting the freezing air fill my lungs. They thought they had won. Veronica thought she had cut out a cost center. She thought she had severed a limb to save the body. But Veronica did not understand the anatomy of her own business. She looked at the contracts and saw the logo of Meridian Crest at the top. She saw the signatures of the clients and assumed they were legally bound to the entity, to the brand, to the building. She was wrong. These were not transactional customers buying software off a shelf. These were massive, complex organizations entrusting us with their most critical infrastructure. They did not buy the software. They bought the assurance that when the software broke at 3 a.m, someone competent would pick up the phone and fix it. They bought me. I pulled my phone out again. The cold made my fingers stiff. But I tapped the screen with precision. I opened the Notes app. I scrolled past the grocery lists and the random ideas for birthday gifts until I found the locked note. I scanned my face to open it. The title was simple, 14 accounts, key person triggers. I read down the list. It was a dossier of leverage. Client A education system. Contract value. 18 million. Clause 14.2. Vendor must notify client of any change in key personnel within 24 hours. Client reserves right to terminate without penalty if replacement is deemed unsatisfactory. Client B, logistics giant. Contract value. 40 million. Clause 9.1. Implementation lead E. Flores named specifically in the statement of work. Removal requires written consent from the steering committee, Client C Insurance Group, contract value, $25 million, no specific clause. But the CFO hates Veronica and only renewed because I promised to handle the migration personally. I went down the list, name by name, dollar amount by dollar amount, 14 clients, $220 million in total contract value. Veronica had cut me off from the email server. She had taken my laptop. She had revoked my building access. She thought she had stripped me naked, but she had forgotten that I was the one who wrote the playbook she was trying to burn. My phone buzzed again. It was the healthcare CEO again. I just asked Cameron where you were. He said you were moved to a support role on the back end to facilitate better processing. I stared at the words. Support role. It was a lie designed to save face. It was a lie designed to keep the client calm while they scrambled to figure out how to do my job. But it was also an insult. It was Veronica trying to rewrite history, trying to diminish 12 years of strategic warfare into administrative paper pushing. Then came the follow-up text. They just said you were only support. So who is signing the strategic roadmap? Because I am looking at a blank page and a sweating MBA student, I looked up at the gray sky. The wind whipped my hair across my face, but I did not brush it away. I typed a reply. I did not confirm. I did not deny. I did not violate my non-solicitation agreement. I simply wrote the truth. I am no longer with the company effective 7 minutes ago. I hit send. I watched the progress bar complete. Veronica wanted a chess match. She wanted to play the grandmaster of corporate strategy. She thought she had cleared the board. She had no idea that she had just knocked over the king. To understand why the phone in my pocket was vibrating with the intensity of a jackhammer, you have to understand exactly what I did for a living. My official title at Meridian Crest Partners was Strategic Accounts Lead on LinkedIn. That sounds like a job filled with handshake lunches, golf outings, and signing ceremonies in glass-walled rooms. It sounds clean. It sounds executive. The reality was that for 12 years, I was a high-paid janitor for disaster zones. I did not sell software. I did not make promises. My job began the moment the sales team popped their champagne corks, collected their commission checks, and handed over a steaming pile of impossible expectations to the implementation team. My job was to step into a conference room where a client was screaming that they were bleeding $100,000 an hour because our system had crashed their supply chain, and somehow convince them not to sue us into oblivion. I managed 14 accounts. In the grand scheme of a multinational corporation, 14 sounds like a small number, but these were not small businesses buying a subscription. These were the whales. They were the tectonic plates upon which the entire revenue floor of Meridian Crest rested. We are talking about a massive healthcare network in the Midwest that processed patient records for 3 million people. We are talking about a logistics giant that moved 40% of the refrigerated freight on the East Coast. We are talking about a university system with an endowment larger than the GDP of some small countries. Together, these 14 clients represented $220 million in multi-year contract value. That number was not just a statistic to me. It was a living, breathing burden that I carried every single day. Veronica saw that number and saw a yield. She saw a spreadsheet cell that could be optimized. She looked at the revenue and assumed it was guaranteed, like rent collecting on a building. She did not understand that at this level. You are not paying for the code. The code is a commodity. You can buy similar software from 3 other vendors by tomorrow afternoon. At $200 million, you are paying for the person who answers the phone when the code fails. I was that person. My value was not in my ability to upsell features. My value was in my war library. Every salesperson lives in the CRM, the customer relationship management software. They log calls, they log emails, they tick boxes, but the CRM is a graveyard of useless data. The CRM tells you that the client is named Arthur P. Henderson and his title is Vice President of Operations. It tells you his email address and the date of the last contract renewal. The CRM does not tell you that Arthur hates being called Arthur and insists on Artie. It does not tell you that he feels threatened by technical jargon because he is insecure about his lack of an engineering degree, so if you use acronyms in a meeting, he will shut down the deal out of spite. It does not tell you that the real decision-maker is not Artie, but his quiet deputy, Sarah, who sits in the back of the room and takes notes. My war library contained thousands of these details. I knew which general counsel would redline a contract for 3 weeks just to prove he was working, and I knew exactly which clause to concede to make him feel like he won so we could sign the deal. I knew that the CTO of our largest insurance client had a daughter with the same rare autoimmune disorder as my niece, and that we had bonded over that shared trauma in a hospital waiting room during a botched software rollout 5 years ago. You cannot upload that kind of data to Salesforce. You cannot transfer it to a 26-year-old MBA graduate like Cameron Voss during a 1-hour handover meeting. Trust in this business is not a warm, fuzzy feeling. It is a mathematical calculation of risk. When a client signs a $20 million deal, they are putting their own career on the line. If the implementation fails, they get fired. It is that simple. When they looked across the table at me, they needed to know that I would bleed before I let them look bad to their board of directors. I built that trust through a methodology that was the exact opposite of what the Meridian Crest sales training manual taught. The manual said, I'd always pivot to the positive. I said, here is exactly how we screwed up, and here is how I am fixing it. The manual said, deflect blame to external factors. I said, this is on me. I own this. The manual said, promise them the roadmap. I said I can get you Function A by Tuesday, but Function B is 3 months away, and if anyone tells you otherwise, they are lying. It was brutal. Radical honesty. And it worked. It worked because when everything was on fire, I was the only one not holding a can of gasoline. There was a specific moment, 3 years ago, that cemented this dynamic. We were in the middle of a catastrophic failure for the logistics client. Their routing system went dark 2 days before Thanksgiving. Trucks were sitting idle. Perishable goods were spoiling. The damages were racking up in the millions. The Meridian Crest executive team wanted to send a legal notice claiming force majeure, blaming an internet service provider outage. They wanted to hide behind the fine print. I refused. I got on a plane, flew to their headquarters in Atlanta, and walked into the office of their CEO. I did not bring a lawyer. I did not bring a slide deck. I brought a sleeping bag. I told him, I am not leaving this building until your trucks are moving. If we have to manually route them on whiteboards, I will hold the marker. I stayed for 72 hours straight. We fixed the system. When the renewal came up the following year, their legal team tried to push for a 20% discount because of the outage. The CEO stopped them. He pointed at me and said the sentence that Veronica had clearly forgotten, or perhaps never knew. He said, we are not signing for the logo on the letterhead. We are signing for her, if she goes. The contract goes. That was the seed. Over the years, that sentiment found its way into the legal language. It is called a key person clause. Usually, these clauses are vague. They say something like, vendor will make best efforts to retain key staff. They are toothless, but my clients were not stupid. They had been burned by bait-and-switch tactics before where a senior expert sells the deal, and then a junior team delivers the work. So, they demanded specific language. They demanded names. Ms. Emery Flores must remain the primary executive contact for the duration of the implementation phase. Any change in the designated strategic account lead allows the client to trigger a review of the service level agreement. Replacement of key personnel requires 30 days prior written notice and client approval of the replacement candidate. These clauses were buried in addendums and exhibits, deep on page 40 or 50 of massive master service agreements. At a company like Meridian Crest, nobody reads the exhibits. The sales team only reads the pricing page to calculate their commission. The legal team scans for liability caps and indemnity clauses. The executives only read the executive summary. I knew they were there because I was the one who redlined them with the clients. I was the one who nodded when the client's counsel added them, knowing it was the only way to get them to sign the renewal without putting the project out for a competitive bid. I never thought I would use them as a weapon. I thought they were a shield, a way to ensure I stayed on the accounts I cared about, to prevent management from shuffling me around like a pawn. Veronica saw me as a bottleneck. She hated that the clients called my personal cell phone instead of the support hotline. She hated that I had more political capital with her customers than she did. She called it inefficient. She called it failing to scale. She wanted to replace the artisan with the assembly line. She wanted to replace the relationship with a process, but she made a fatal calculation error. She assumed that the process could handle the weight of $220 million. She did not know about the time I drove through a blizzard to deliver a hard drive to the education client because their cloud access was down. She did not know that the insurance CFO trusted me to audit our own invoices because he knew I would catch errors that favored us. Not just him. She thought she was firing an employee. She did not realize she was pulling the pin on a grenade that had been sitting on the table for 12 years. I checked my phone again. The messages were still coming in. "Who is Cameron Voss?" asked the VP of Operations for the logistics firm. "And why is he asking me for the server credentials you have had for 5 years?" I did not reply to that one yet. I let the question hang in the air. I let the silence do the heavy lifting. I was not an arsonist. I did not start this fire. I was simply the firefighter who had just been relieved of duty, and now I was standing on the sidewalk, watching the sparks begin to land on the dry roof of Meridian Crest Partners. The war did not begin with a termination letter. It began 6 months earlier, in a town hall meeting that smelled of stale bagels and desperate optimism. That was the day Veronica Slade took the stage. She had been parachuted in after a private equity shakeup, carrying the title of Chief Revenue Officer and a mandate to trim the fat. Veronica was a creature of the boardroom, a woman who spoke exclusively in buzzwords that sounded expensive but meant absolutely nothing. She stood in front of a projection screen displaying a stock photo of a rowing team and talked about synergy, alignment, and the need to break down silos. I stood in the back, leaning against the wall, drinking tepid coffee. I had survived 3 restructurings at Meridian Crest before this one. I assumed Veronica was just another suit who would last 18 months, cash out her stock options, and move on to ruin a different company. I was wrong. Veronica was not just greedy. She was insecure, and there is nothing more dangerous in a corporate hierarchy than a leader who is terrified that her subordinates are smarter than she is. The friction started 3 weeks into her tenure. We were on a conference call with the logistics client, the $40 million account. The client's COO was angry about a latency issue in the dispatch module. Veronica interrupted him. "I hear your frustration," she said, using her practiced, soothing voice. "But let us take a step back and look at the holistic value add of the partnership." The line went silent. "Veronica," the COO said, his voice dropping an octave, "I do not care about the holistic value add. My trucks are sitting in a parking lot in Newark. Put Emery on the phone." I saw Veronica's jaw tighten. Her smile remained fixed, but her eyes went dead. "I am right here," I said, stepping closer to the speakerphone. "I tracked the latency to a database index issue. We are rolling back the patch now. Your trucks will move in 10 minutes. "Thank you, Emery," the COO said. "Next time, let's skip the marketing speech." All right. That was the moment I became a target. In Veronica's world, I had committed the ultimate sin. I had made myself essential, and I had made her look redundant. She could not fire the client, so she decided to erase me. Her weapon of choice was not a gun, but a man named Cameron Voss. Cameron was 30 years old, had an MBA from a school that sounded impressive on a resume, and possessed the unique ability to speak for 20 minutes without conveying a single piece of concrete information. He wore fleece vests and talked about thought leadership and blue sky thinking. He was the kind of person who treated a casual coffee chat like a TED Talk. Veronica brought him into my office on a Tuesday morning. "Emery," she said, "meet Cameron. He is going to be joining the strategic accounts team as your counterpart." "Counterpart?" I asked. I did not know we had open headcount. "We are shifting the model," Veronica said. "You are too in the weeds. Emery, you are bogged down in the day-to-day execution. We need someone to handle the high-level relationship management. Cameron is going to drive the strategic vision." I looked at Cameron. He grinned and offered a hand that felt as soft as a stress ball. "Excited to dive in," Cameron said. "I think there is a lot of low-hanging fruit we can capture if we optimize the client journey." I knew exactly what this was. It was a classic corporate play. You bring in a cheaper, more pliable replacement, force the senior expert to train them, and then cut the expert loose once the knowledge transfer is complete. "Great," I said, keeping my face blank. "Welcome aboard." The suffocation began the next day. Veronica sent out an email to the entire department with the subject line, "Process Optimization Protocol, effective immediately, to ensure seamless continuity and visibility. All client communications must include Cameron Voss. Any direct emails to clients must be CC'd to Cameron. Any scheduled calls must include Cameron on the invite. We need to move away from single points of failure and build a robust team ecosystem." Single point of failure. That was me. She framed it as risk management. In reality, she was building a wall between me and the people who trusted me. She wanted the clients to get used to seeing Cameron's name. She wanted them to think of him as the lead and me as the technician in the back room. I did not argue. I did not storm into her office and scream about my 12 years of service. That is what amateurs do. Instead, I complied, maliciously. "You want to be on the emails, Cameron." I thought. Fine. I CC'd him on everything. I copied him on the automated server logs that generated 500 alerts a night. I copied him on the complex, 300-page technical specification documents for the healthcare data migration. I copied him on the threads where the client's engineers were debating the nuances of API integration in SQL code. I drowned him in the reality of the job he thought he wanted. Within a week, Cameron looked exhausted. He would come to my desk, eyes wide. "Emery, do I need to read all of these?" he asked. "Veronica said she wants full visibility," I replied, not looking up from my monitor. "I would hate for you to miss a critical detail that impacts the strategic vision." He retreated to his office, defeated, but Veronica was relentless. Since she could not attack my performance, she attacked my perception. I found out about her next move during a quarterly business review preparation meeting. I walked into the conference room early to set up the projector. The slide deck was already loaded on the screen. It was the organizational chart for the upcoming board meeting. At the top was Veronica. Below her, a new box, Director of Client Strategy, Cameron Voss. And below Cameron, a small box branching off to the side, Account Support Specialist Emery Flores. I felt a cold flash of heat in my chest. Account support. She had demoted me 2 levels without even telling me. She was going to present this to the board of directors, effectively telling them that the woman who held the relationships with their biggest revenue sources was nothing more than an administrative assistant. She was scrubbing my name from the history of the deals I had closed. I heard footsteps in the hall. I quickly minimized the presentation and sat down, opening my notebook. Veronica walked in, followed by Cameron. She looked at me, her eyes lingering for a fraction of a second too long. She was waiting for me to snap. She wanted me to be the angry, emotional employee so she could label me difficult or resistant to change. I gave her nothing. "Ready for the dry run?" I asked pleasantly. Veronica blinked, confused by my calm. "Yes, let's begin." That night, I stayed late. The office was empty, the cleaning crew humming their vacuums in the distance. I was not working on client deliverables. I was building my defense. I created a new folder on my personal drive. I named it The Receipts. I went through my inbox and exported every email where Veronica had instructed me to delay a critical fix to save money. I saved every chat log where Cameron asked me basic questions that a junior associate should know, proving his incompetence. I documented every instance where a client explicitly asked for me and Veronica tried to block it. I was building a timeline, but I was still 1 step behind, and I did not know it until the following Thursday. I was at the shared printer, waiting for a contract addendum to finish printing. The machine was jammed. I opened the tray to clear the paper path. Buried under a stack of marketing flyers was a single sheet of paper that someone had printed and forgotten to retrieve. It happens all the time in offices. People hit print, get distracted, and leave their secrets in the tray. I pulled it out. It was an email draft from Veronica to HR. Subject: Performance Improvement Plan Draft. Hi team. I need to initiate a PIP for Emery Flores starting next month. We need to structure the objectives so they are aggressive. The goal is to document a pattern of non-compliance with the new strategic direction. Let's set the targets high enough that we have grounds for termination within 30 days of the period ending. Cameron will provide the necessary feedback incidents. I stood there, the paper trembling slightly in my hand. It was not a performance improvement plan. It was a premeditated execution. She wasn't waiting for me to fail. She was engineering the failure. She was going to set goals I could not hit, aggressive targets, and use Cameron, the man who did not know how to log into the system, to judge my work. I looked around the empty hallway. No cameras, no witnesses. I took a picture of the document with my phone. Then I crumpled the paper and shoved it deep into the recycling bin, buried under a pile of old newsletters. I walked back to my desk. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my mind was crystal clear. I had thought this was a battle for respect. I realized now it was a battle for survival. Veronica Slade was not just trying to push me aside, she was trying to destroy my professional reputation to cover her own tracks. I looked at the picture on my phone. Let's set the targets high enough. Okay, Veronica, I whispered to the empty office. You want to play the numbers game? Let's see what happens when the numbers fight back. I picked up my pen and went back to work. I had 14 clients to protect, and now I had 30 days to make sure that when the axe fell, it wouldn't be my head on the block. The sabotage was not subtle. It was a slow, deliberate suffocation designed to make me look incompetent on paper while removing my ability to defend myself in person. It started with the calendar invites. For 12 years, my Outlook calendar had been a solid block of color, packed with steering committees, risk assessments, and executive status updates. But on Monday morning, I logged in to find my schedule curiously empty. At 10 in the morning, a notification popped up on our internal messaging platform, Slack. It was from the project channel for the Midwest Healthcare account, our second largest client. Emery, we are waiting for you on the bridge. The CIO has questions about the security audit. I frowned. I checked my calendar again. There was nothing there. I searched my deleted items, thinking I might have accidentally declined. Nothing. I typed a reply. I do not have an invite for this session. Send me the link, and I will join immediately. Before I could hit enter, Veronica Slade posted in the channel. Emery seems to be having trouble managing her schedule this week. Cameron, please step in and walk the CIO through the audit results. We cannot keep the client waiting. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. It was a lie, a blatant, public lie, designed to paint me as disorganized and unreliable in front of the entire project team. If I argued in the chat, I would look defensive. If I said nothing, I accepted the narrative. I took a screenshot of the chat log. Then I took a screenshot of my calendar showing no invite. I saved both to my personal drive under a folder named Evidence of Obstruction. Then I walked to the break room to get coffee, leaving Cameron to fumble through a security audit he had never read. 2 hours later, I received an email from Veronica, CCing HR, subject: Professional Expectations, Emery. Missing a critical client meeting is unacceptable. We need to ensure you are fully present during this transition period. Please consider this a verbal warning regarding attendance and responsiveness. She was building the paper trail. She was feeding the HR beast, document by document, so that when she finally fired me, it would look like a mercy killing rather than an execution. But Veronica's strategy had a flaw. She assumed that by removing me from the meetings would go well. On Wednesday, the cracks in her plan turned into a chasm. We were in the middle of a massive data migration for the education system client. We were moving millions of student records from a legacy on-premise server to our new cloud infrastructure. It was a delicate operation that required surgical precision. One wrong command could corrupt the academic records of 50,000 students. I was sitting at my desk, locked out of the administration console, forcing me to watch the progress bar as a passive observer. Cameron was driving the deployment. At 2 in the afternoon, my Slack lit up. It was a direct message from the client's lead engineer, a man named David, who I had known for 7 years. Emory, the data validation is failing. We are seeing a 40% error rate on the transcripts. Why are we pushing the test configuration to the production environment? My stomach dropped. Cameron was using the wrong configuration file. He was trying to push dummy data into the live system. If this continued for another hour, the system would lock up. The client would miss their reporting deadline to the state. That triggered a service-level agreement penalty. The contract stated that for every hour of downtime during critical reporting periods, Meridian Crest owed the client $10,000 in credits. I looked across the open plan office. Cameron was wearing noise-canceling headphones, bobbing his head to music, completely oblivious to the red warning lights flashing on the dashboard. I stood up. My instinct, my training screamed at me to run over, shove him out of the chair, and execute the emergency rollback command. That is what I had done for 12 years. I fixed things. I saved the day. But I was not the strategic accounts lead anymore. I was just account support. I sat back down. I replied to David, I do not have write access to the deployment server anymore. You need to flag this to Cameron Voss immediately. I already did. David replied. He said it is just a cache issue and to let it finish. I closed my eyes. Cameron was going to crash the system because he did not want to admit he was wrong. I had a choice. I could let the client burn to prove a point, or I could intervene. I decided to thread the needle. I would save the client, but I would not save Cameron. I walked over to Cameron's desk. I did not tap him on the shoulder. I stood in his peripheral vision until he took off his headphones. The client is seeing a 40% error rate, I said, my voice loud enough for the nearby sales team to hear. You are using the sandbox config file. If you do not kill the process in the next 5 minutes, we breach the SLA. Cameron rolled his eyes. Emory, I checked it. It is fine. You are being alarmist. Okay, I said. I am sending an email to the client confirming that you are aware of the error rate and have chosen to proceed. I just want to make sure the liability is clear. Cameron froze. The color drained from his face. He knew that if I put that in writing, he could not blame the software. He would be personally responsible for the financial penalty. Wait, he stammered. He turned back to his screen, his hands shaking. He finally looked at the logs. Oh God, it is rejecting the files. Command-Shift-R to rollback, I said calmly. He hit the keys. The progress bar stopped. The system began to revert. We avoided the penalty by minutes, but the damage to trust was done. The next morning, the phone calls started. The vice president of the education system called the main office line and demanded to speak to Veronica. I was not in the room, but the walls of the executive offices were thin, and Veronica's voice tended to get shrill when she was defensive. I understand your concern, Veronica was saying, but Cameron is fully capable. Yes, I know Emory has the history, but, sir, please let me finish. She was losing control. 10 minutes later, a company-wide memo went out from Veronica's office. Policy update, client communication protocols. To ensure consistent messaging, all client inquiries must be routed through the primary account owner, Cameron Voss. Support staff are strictly prohibited from taking unscheduled calls from clients. If a client calls you directly, please redirect them to Cameron immediately. She was trying to legislate behavior. She thought that if she wrote a policy, the clients would obey it. She was delusional. My personal cell phone rang 20 minutes after the memo went out. It was the education VP. Emory, he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. I just got off the phone with your boss. She told me I'm not allowed to talk to you. Is that true? I walked out of the office, down the hall to the fire escape stairwell, the only place in the building with privacy. I cannot discuss internal policy, I said carefully, but I can tell you that my access to your system has been revoked. I cannot help you with the migration. Even if I wanted to, that is unacceptable, he said. We have a board meeting next week. If that system is not live, I am in trouble. And if I am in trouble, Meridian Crest is in trouble. I do not trust this Cameron kid. He nearly wiped our database yesterday. I know, I said. I need you in the room, Emery. Not on the phone, in the room. I am sorry, I said. And I genuinely was. I have been instructed to direct you to Cameron. To hell with Cameron, he snapped. The line went dead. I went back to my desk. I knew what would happen next. He would call Veronica back. He would threaten to cancel the contract. Veronica would blame me for poisoning the well, but while Veronica was fighting fires with the clients, I found something much more dangerous in the internal files. Since I had been stripped of my daily duties, I had time to look at the broader picture. I started digging into the project roadmaps for the next 2 quarters. I noticed a pattern. 3 of my largest accounts, logistics, insurance, and manufacturing, had major upgrades scheduled for late March. That was the end of the first fiscal quarter. These upgrades were critical for the clients, but they carried high implementation risks. In the project management system, the dates had been changed. The go-live dates for all 3 had been pushed to the 2nd week of April. I frowned. Why delay? The code was ready. The clients were ready. Then I pulled up the executive bonus structure documentation, which was available on the shared HR drive if you knew where to look. Veronica's quarterly bonus was tied to customer stability. If a major incident occurred during the quarter, like a failed upgrade, her bonus would be docked. By pushing the risky upgrades to April, she was ensuring her Q1 record remained spotless. She was protecting her payout. But delaying those upgrades meant the clients would miss their own operational targets. The logistics client needed the upgrade before the spring shipping surge. The insurance client needed it before their audit cycle began. Veronica was trading client success for her own bank account. I opened the change logs in the project management tool. Entry date moved from March 28th to April 10th. User V, Slade, reason resource constraints. There were no resource constraints. We had the team. We had the time. I exported the logs. I exported the original project plans that showed the March commitment dates. I exported the emails where the clients pleaded for the March dates, and Veronica claimed it was technically impossible. I had proof that she was lying to the clients to pad her own wallet. I sat back in my chair. The office around me was buzzing with the low hum of people working, making sales, writing code. They had no idea that the woman steering the ship was drilling holes in the hull to sell the scrap metal. I looked at my folder. Evidence of obstruction was getting full. I had the missed meetings. I had the Cameron near disaster. I had the policy trying to gag me. And now, I had the financial manipulation. I realized something with absolute clarity. If I stayed, the clients would leave. They would leave because Cameron was incompetent and Veronica was corrupt. The churn was inevitable. The $220 million would evaporate within 18 months. Veronica knew it too. That was why she was building the PAP. She needed a scapegoat. When the clients walked away, she needed to be able to say, "It was Emery's fault. She managed these accounts poorly for years, and we couldn't clean up her mess in time." She was preloading the blame onto my shoulders. I closed my laptop. She thought she was writing the story of my failure. She did not realize she was handing me the pen, the paper, and the evidence to write her obituary. I checked my phone one last time. Another text from the healthcare CEO. "We are reviewing the contract terms regarding key personnel. Expect a letter." I did not reply. I did not have to. The dominoes were already falling, and for the first time in months, I was not the one trying to catch them. I was just watching them align. The 30-day countdown was not an opportunity for improvement. It was a slow-motion autopsy performed on a living patient. The Performance Improvement Plan, or PIP, that Veronica Slade slid across my desk a month ago was a masterclass in corporate fiction. It contained objectives that were not just aggressive, they were mathematical impossibilities. Objective 1. Secure 3 net new enterprise logos within the calendar month. In our industry, the average sales cycle is 9 months. Veronica knew that. Objective 2. Eliminate all backlog tickets for the Midwest Healthcare account. That backlog was dependent on a patch from the engineering team that was not scheduled for release until next quarter. Veronica knew that, too. Objective 3: achieve 100% client satisfaction score on all active projects. This was the kill shot. She had already instructed Cameron to delay the upgrades, ensuring the clients were furious. She had engineered the dissatisfaction she was now using to hang me. I did not argue when I received the document. I did not try to hit the targets. I knew that even if I walked on water, Veronica would claim I had failed to swim. Instead, I spent those 30 days quietly exporting my personal contacts, archiving my performance reviews from previous years, and ensuring my war library was committed to memory. When the calendar flipped to day 31, the summons came. It was 9 in the morning. The invite was titled simply, Status Update. I walked into the conference room, the same glass-walled aquarium where this started, and found the tribunal waiting. Veronica sat with her back to the window, silhouetted against the gray Chicago skyline. Beside her sat the HR director, a woman named Linda, who had the personality of a stapler. There was no small talk. There was no, "How was your weekend?" "Have a seat, Emery," Linda said. Her voice was flat, rehearsed. I sat. The laptop in front of Linda was open. I could see the reflection of the termination letter in the polished mahogany table. "We have reviewed your performance against the objectives set forth in the improvement plan," Veronica said. She did not look at me. She looked at a spot on the wall just above my left shoulder. "Unfortunately, you have not met the required standards. As a result, we are terminating your employment, effective immediately." "Effective immediately," I repeated. "Not end of day, not end of pay period." "Immediately," Linda said. "Security is already waiting to escort you. We need to collect your badge and laptop now." It was a blitzkrieg. They wanted me out of the building before I could send a goodbye email, before I could download a file, before I could walk over to a colleague and whisper the truth. They wanted to sever the head before the body knew it was dead. Linda slid a thick packet of papers across the table. "This is your separation agreement," she said. "Because of your tenure, the company is offering a severance package equivalent to 12 weeks of pay. This is contingent, of course, on you signing the release of claims and the attached non-disclosure agreement." I placed my hand on the stack of papers. It was warm from the printer. "And the non-solicitation?" I asked. Linda blinked. She was used to people crying, or shouting, or begging. She was not used to people skipping straight to the legal clauses. "It is standard language," Linda said, recovering quickly. "For a period of 12 months, you agree not to solicit, induce, or encourage any client of Meridian Crest Partners to move their business elsewhere. You also agree not to solicit any employees to leave the firm." "And communication?" I asked. Veronica finally looked at me. Her eyes were hard. "You are to cease all communication with Meridian Crest clients immediately. If we find out you have emailed, texted, or called any of the accounts on your roster, we will consider it a breach of contract and we will claw back your severance. We will also pursue legal action for tortious interference." It was a threat, plain and simple. "Shut up, or we will bankrupt you." I picked up the agreement. I did not sign it. I flipped past the signature page, past the severance calculation, and turned to the definitions section in the back. "I need to see the specific language regarding the notification of departure," I said. "Why?" Veronica snapped. "It does not concern you. You are leaving." "It concerns me," I said, my voice steady, "because my reputation is the only asset I'm taking with me." I found the clause, paragraph 14, subsection B. The company reserves the right to notify external partners of the employee's departure in a manner deemed appropriate by the company to ensure business continuity. And there was the trap. If I signed this, I was giving them permission to tell my clients whatever they wanted. They could say I was fired for incompetence. They could say I had a nervous breakdown. They could say I stole money. And because I would have signed a non-disparagement clause, I would be legally gagged from correcting the record. They wanted to pay me 12 weeks of salary to buy my silence while they assassinated my character. I closed the folder. I am not signing this today, I said. Veronica let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a sound devoid of humor. Emery, do not be stupid. If you walk out of here without signing, the offer expires in 48 hours. You get nothing, no money, no reference. You will be unemployed in a tough market with a termination on your record. I will take it under review, I said. You are making a mistake, Linda warned, her robotic facade cracking slightly. This is a generous offer. Is it? I looked at Veronica. You are offering me $30,000 to let you lie to clients who trust me more than they trust you. Veronica leaned forward. The predator was coming out. Let's be clear about something. Emery, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. You are an account manager. You are support staff. You think you own these relationships. You don't. Meridian Crest owns them. The contract owns them. You are just the voice on the phone. You are replaceable. You are nothing. She paused, letting the insult hang in the air like smoke. Who do you think you are? She asked. It was the question she had been dying to ask since the day she arrived. She wanted to crush the arrogance she perceived in me. She wanted to remind me of the hierarchy, but she had just handed me the key. By asking that question, she revealed her total ignorance of the battlefield. She thought power came from the organizational chart. She thought power came from the logo on the business card. She did not know that power comes from the person who holds the solution when the problem is costing $10,000 a minute. I stood up. I picked up the unsigned separation agreement and tucked it under my arm. I am the person, I said, looking her dead in the eye. Who knows where the bodies are buried because I am the one who had to dig the graves for your mistakes. Veronica's face flushed a deep, angry red. Get out. Security. I am going, I said. I turned to Linda. I want a copy of my original employment contract and the specific non-solicit addendum I signed 12 years ago sent to my personal email within the hour. By law, I am entitled to my personnel file. I did not wait for an answer. I walked to the door. My badge was already deactivated. I heard the lock click shut behind me as I exited the room. I walked through the lobby. I did not stop at my desk. There was nothing there I needed. My real files were in my head. My real assets were in my phone contacts. I stepped out onto the sidewalk. The wind was still cold, but the sun was trying to break through the clouds. I looked down at the separation agreement in my hand. Company may notify clients. They were going to send the email. They were going to tell the lie. They were going to say, Emery is gone. Meet Cameron. They thought that was the end of the story. I took a deep breath and hailed a cab. Where to? The driver asked. The Loop, I said. I need to find a lawyer. Veronica had fired a warning shot. She thought I would retreat. She did not realize that by cutting me loose, she had just removed the only thing holding me back, my loyalty to the company. She had just made me a free agent, and she was about to find out exactly who I was. Renee Whitman's office smelled of old leather and expensive intimidation. She was an employment attorney who specialized in executive exits, known in Chicago legal circles as the scalpel, because she could dissect a non-compete agreement without drawing a single drop of unnecessary blood. She sat behind a desk that looked large enough to land a plane on, reading the documents I had printed out. For 10 minutes. The only sound in the room was the rhythmic scratching of her fountain pen as she marked up my separation agreement. Finally, she looked up. Do not sign this, she said. It was a command, not a suggestion. I did not plan to, I replied. I want to know where the line is. Renee, I know what the paper says, but I need to know what the law says. Renee took off her glasses. The law says that Meridian Crest cannot own your memory. They cannot own your personality. And most importantly, in the state of Illinois, they have a very hard time enforcing a non-solicitation agreement if they fired you without cause, especially if the terms are overly broad. She tapped the paper with a manicured fingernail. Here is the rule, Emery. It is simple, but you must follow it with religious discipline. You cannot ask them to leave. You cannot say, I am going to a new firm. Please come with me. You cannot send them a price list. You cannot disparage Meridian Crest. So I have to be a ghost? I asked. No, Renee smiled, and it was a sharp, predatory thing. You can announce your new employment. You can update your LinkedIn. You can answer the phone if they call you. If a client reaches out and asks, where are you? You can tell them. If they ask, can we move our business to you? You can say, I would be happy to discuss that, provided you initiate the process. The difference, she continued, leaning forward, is between pulling and catching. You are not allowed to pull, but if they jump, you are allowed to catch them. I left her office with a retainer agreement signed and a very specific set of instructions. I felt lighter. The gray fog of the termination was lifting, replaced by the clarity of a mission. My next stop was not home. It was a quiet bistro on the north side of the city, where I had a lunch meeting scheduled with the managing partner of Harbor Gray Advisory. Harbor Gray was the main competitor to Meridian Crest. They were smaller, leaner, and hungry. I had competed against them for a decade. I had beaten them for a decade, but I had always respected them because they played the game with integrity. The partner, a man named David Aris, was waiting for me. He did not waste time with pleasantries. I heard you are on the market, David said as I sat down. News travels fast. I am considering my options, I said. We want you, David said. We have wanted you for 5 years. But I need to be clear. Emery, we run a clean shop. I cannot touch you if you are bringing over Meridian's trade secrets or proprietary code. I do not want their intellectual property. I do not want a lawsuit. I do not have their data, I said. I returned my laptop. I wiped my personal devices of all company files. I do not need their spreadsheets. David, then what do you bring? He asked. I bring the fact that 14 of the biggest companies in this country sleep better at night because they know my cell phone number, I said. I bring the trust. David studied me. He was doing the math. He knew the value of my portfolio, $220 million. Even a fraction of that would change the trajectory of his firm. If we bring you on as a partner, David said, we will structure your compensation around the business you bring in. But we have to do this by the book. No poaching, no aggressive outreach. I won't call them, I promised. I won't have to. We shook hands. I walked out of that bistro as a partner at Harbor Gray Advisory. I had no desk, no computer, and technically, no clients. But I had a landing zone. For the next 48 hours, I worked from my dining room table. I did not log into any Meridian systems. I did not access any old emails. I worked entirely from memory and public information. I drafted a document I called the Client Continuity Brief. It was a masterpiece of generic strategy. It did not mention Meridian Crest. It did not mention specific contract numbers or private pricing. Instead, it outlined the universal challenges facing the industries I specialized in. For the logistics sector, I wrote about the risks of database latency during the holiday shipping surge. For the healthcare sector, I wrote about the compliance pitfalls of the new federal data privacy regulations coming into effect next month. It was not a sales pitch. It was a white paper. It was proof of competence. It was a signal flare that said, I am still here, and I still know what keeps you awake at night. I posted it on my personal LinkedIn profile with a simple caption, excited to begin a new chapter as partner at Harbor Gray Advisory. Here are my thoughts on the risks facing enterprise infrastructure in the coming quarter. Then, I waited. The response was not immediate. It was a slow burn. The first vibration came at 7 in the evening. It was the CFO of the insurance group. Saw the update. Congrats. Does this mean you are not managing our audit next month? I looked at the phone. Renee's voice echoed in my head. Do not solicit. Do not disparage. I typed a careful reply. Thank you. That is correct. I am no longer with Meridian Crest. You will need to coordinate the audit with your new point of contact there. I hit send. 10 minutes later, the reply came. My new point of contact is a kid named Cameron who thinks an audit is a type of car. This is a problem. I did not reply to that. I let the silence do the work. I let him sit with the realization that he was about to face a federal regulatory audit with a junior associate who was currently drowning in support tickets. The second text came from the director of operations for the manufacturing client. Emery, we are halfway through the implementation. If you aren't running it, we are going to miss the deadline. Can we move the contract to Harbor Gray? This was the dangerous one. This was the bait. If I said, yes, Meridian could sue me for solicitation. I replied, I cannot discuss the transfer of active contracts. However, Harbor Gray has a dedicated implementation practice that is currently accepting new engagements. If you wish to discuss independent services, that inquiry must originate from your legal department to ours. It was cold. It was formal. It was legally bulletproof. But the real weapon was not what I was saying. It was what Meridian Crest was about to do. I sat back in my chair and looked at the calendar. It had been 3 days since my termination. According to the standard operating procedure that I had helped write years ago, the company was required to send a formal notification of a key personnel change within 72 hours. Veronica was likely drafting that email right now. She would frame it as a positive thing. She would say I had moved on to pursue other opportunities, and that Cameron was excited to step up. She thought the email was administrative. She thought it was just checking a box. She'd forgotten about the trigger. I closed my eyes and visualized the contract for the logistics giant, my biggest whale, worth $40 million, Clause 9.1, Key Person Designation. It stated that if the named key person me was removed from the account for any reason other than death or disability, the client had the automatic right to pause all billing and reevaluate the vendor relationship. Crucially, the clause had a mechanism that Veronica had definitely overlooked. It said that the reevaluation period triggered immediately upon the receipt of formal written notice from the vendor. That meant the moment Veronica hit send on that mass email introducing Cameron, she wasn't just introducing a new account manager. She was legally handing the client a pair of scissors and inviting them to cut the cord. She was pulling the trigger on herself. My phone buzzed again. It was Renee, my lawyer. Just got a letter from Meridian's general counsel. They are reminding you of your obligations. They sound nervous. I smiled. Tell them I am complying fully. I typed back, I am just sitting at home, waiting for the mail. And I was waiting for the email that would land in the inboxes of 14 CEOs, CFOs, and CIOs. The email that would turn my absence from a personnel issue into a contractual crisis. Veronica wanted to erase me. She was about to find out that by trying to wipe my name off the board, she was actually dissolving the glue that held her entire revenue stream together. The screen of my laptop dimmed, but I didn't touch it. I didn't need to work anymore tonight. The trap was set. The cheese was placed, and the rat was already walking toward the spring. The email from Meridian Crest arrived in the inboxes of 14 C-suite executives at exactly 4:55 in the afternoon on a Friday. It was a coward's timing. In the corporate world, you release bad news late on a Friday, hoping that the weekend will dilute the anger before Monday morning rolls around. The subject line was innocuous, update regarding your account leadership team. I did not receive the email. Of course, my access had been revoked, but in the age of digital transparency, secrets have a very short shelf life. Within 10 minutes, a screenshot of the message was forwarded to my personal phone by 3 different contacts. The text was a masterclass in corporate sanitation. Dear valued partner, we are writing to inform you that Emery Flores has moved on to pursue other opportunities. We wish her the best. We are thrilled to announce that Cameron Voss will be stepping in as your dedicated strategic accounts director. Cameron brings fresh energy and a focus on process optimization to ensure your continued success. Fresh energy, that was code for cheaper. Process optimization, that was code for we are going to automate the service you used to get from a human. Veronica Slade probably went home that Friday evening feeling triumphant. She had ripped off the Band-Aid. She believed that by Monday, the clients would have accepted the new reality. She thought the transition was a done deal. She was wrong. She had not ripped off a Band-Aid. She had pulled the pin on a grenade and walked away, assuming it was a dud. The explosion happened on Monday morning. The first sign of trouble was the silence. Usually, when a new account manager is introduced, the client replies with a polite, "Welcome aboard," or "Let's schedule a sync." Cameron received 0 welcome emails. Instead, 48 hours after the announcement, 3 major clients, the education system, the healthcare network, and a specialized logistics firm replied to the thread. They did not reply to Cameron. They replied to Veronica, and they CC'd their own legal counsels. The message from the education system was particularly blunt. "We acknowledge receipt of your notice. Given the critical nature of our ongoing data migration, we require a mandatory handover call with Emery Flores present to ensure knowledge transfer. We will not authorize Cameron Voss to access our production environment until this handover is verified." Veronica was cornered. She could not produce me. She had fired me, escorted me out, and burned the bridge. There was no handover documentation because she hadn't let me write any. I sat in my apartment, watching the chaos unfold through the back channels. My phone was buzzing not with calls from Meridian, but with text messages from the friends I still had inside the building, junior project managers and support engineers who were watching the executive floor melt down. Jenna Support Tech. Cameron is sweating through his shirt. He has been in Veronica's office for 2 hours. I think the education client just locked us out of the VPN. But the real disaster happened on Tuesday afternoon. Cameron had to lead a quarterly executive review for the insurance group. This was a $25 million account. The client was expecting a detailed roadmap of the compliance features for the new fiscal year. I knew exactly what the status of those features was because I had fought with the product team about them for 6 months. They were delayed. They were not going to be ready until Q3. My plan had been to tell the client the truth and offer a temporary workaround to keep them compliant. Cameron, however, did not know the product roadmap. He only knew what Veronica told him to say. According to a transcript I received later from a sympathetic source, the meeting went something like this. The client's CTO asked, "Can you confirm the HIPAA masking feature will be live by January 1st? A competent account manager would have said, "No, but here's the mitigation plan." Cameron, eager to please and terrified of losing the room, said, "Absolutely. We are on track for a January 1st deployment. It is fully scoped and in the testing phase." It was a lie. A verifiable, recorded lie. The CTO paused. "That is interesting, Cameron, because I had lunch with your lead engineer last week, and he told me the code hasn't even been written yet." The silence on the line must have been excruciating. "Well," Cameron stammered, "I think there might be a miscommunication. I was referring to the beta environment." "Stop," the CTO said. "You are guessing. Emery never guessed. If she didn't know, she said she didn't know. If you are lying to me about the roadmap, what else are you lying about?" The call ended 4 minutes early. An hour later, the insurance group sent a formal notice of breach. They weren't canceling yet, but they were putting Meridian Crest on notice. They had recorded the call. They had proof of misrepresentation. The dominoes were clicking against each other, gaining speed. But the final blow, the one that turned a bad week into a catastrophe, came from the logistics giant, the $40 million whale. It was Wednesday morning when my phone rang. I looked at the caller ID. It was Robert, the CFO of the logistics company. I hesitated. I remembered Renee's warning. "Do not solicit." I answered. "Hello, Robert." "Emery," Robert said. His voice was calm, the voice of a man who managed a billion-dollar balance sheet. "I received the email about your departure." "I assume you did," I said. "I am sorry I could not tell you personally. It happened very quickly. I am looking at our master service agreement," Robert said. "Specifically, the addendum we signed 3 years ago, Clause 9.1. My heart skipped a beat. Clause 9.1. The key person trigger. "I am familiar with it," I said neutrally. "It says here," Robert read, "that if the designated key person is removed from the account, the client reserves the right to immediately terminate the agreement without penalty, provided notice is given within 10 business days of the change. That sounds correct, I said. Cameron Voss called me this morning. Robert continued. He called me Bob. He tried to explain that the price increase for next year is mandatory. He does not know our business, Emery. He thinks we move boxes. He does not understand that we move timing. He is new, I said, treading carefully. He will learn. We do not have $40 million of patience for him to learn, Robert said. I am calling to tell you that we are activating the clause. We are sending the termination letter to your CEO within the hour. I stayed silent. This was it. The churn. But before I send it, Robert said, his voice softening slightly, I wanted to thank you. Thank you. I asked. For what? Do you remember when we negotiated this contract? Robert asked. I was ready to sign the standard boilerplate. I was ready to sign the generic version that locked us in for 5 years regardless of who was managing the account. I remembered. We were in a steakhouse in downtown Chicago. It was raining. I remember, I said. You stopped me, Robert said. You pushed the paper back across the table. You told me, Robert, corporations change, management changes. If I am not the one driving the bus, you need the right to get off at the next stop. You literally redlined your own company's contract to protect me. I closed my eyes, remembering the risk I had taken that night. I had done it because I knew that if he felt trapped, he would be a difficult client. If he felt free, he would stay forever. I told you to put the clause in, I whispered. Yes, you did, Robert said. You gave me the knife I am about to use to cut your old boss's throat. That is why we trust you. Emery, you looked out for us, even when it wasn't in your interest. What will you do now? I asked. You still need the software. We do, Robert said, but we can buy the software license through a third-party reseller. We don't need Meridian's professional services team. We just need the code. For the strategy. For the implementation. He paused. I hear Harbor Gray Advisory has a very capable new partner. I gripped the phone tighter. They do, and I believe they are accepting new clients. Good, Robert said. Expect a call from our legal team to yours. We are following the trust. The line went dead. I put the phone down on the table. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer magnitude of what was happening. Veronica Slade had looked at the spreadsheet and seen $220 million of guaranteed revenue. She thought she owned it. She did not realize that the revenue was not attached to the software. It was attached to the relationship. Back at Meridian Crest, the panic was setting in. I learned later that when the termination letter from the logistics giant hit the fax machine, yes, they sent it by fax for legal timestamps. Veronica screamed so loud she could be heard in the lobby. She called an emergency meeting. She demanded to know why the clients were leaving. She blamed the economy. She blamed the pricing. She blamed the product. But deep down, as she looked at the 3 termination notices and the 2 breach of contract warnings piling up on her desk, she was forced to confront the terrifying reality she had ignored for 6 months. She had axed the support staff. She had cut the cost center, but the clients weren't leaving because of the product. They were leaving because the person who held the map had just walked out of the building, and they refused to follow a tour guide who was reading from a script. The bleeding had started, and Veronica had no idea how to make it stop. The courier arrived at my apartment at 7 in the morning on a Thursday. He was wearing a bike helmet and holding a thick, rigid envelope marked Urgent Legal Service. I did not need to open it to know what it was. In the corporate world, when you cannot win on merit, you litigate. I sat at my kitchen counter and slit the envelope open with a butter knife. The letterhead was heavy, cream-colored, and embossed with the logo of a prestigious law firm that Meridian Crest retained for their dirty work. Cease and desist order, re-breach of contract, misappropriation of trade secrets, and tortious interference with business relations. I read the accusations. They were bold, aggressive, and almost entirely fabricated. They accused me of systematic solicitation of the logistics client, They claimed I had stolen proprietary intellectual property regarding pricing models. They demanded that I earn over all electronic devices for forensic analysis and sign a confession admitting to the solicitation. If I had been 25, I might have panicked. I might have called Veronica and begged for mercy, but I was 37. I had stared down federal regulators and hostile auditors. A threatening letter from a lawyer who billed by the hour did not frighten me. It bored me. I finished my coffee, took a picture of the letter, and sent it to Renee. They pulled the trigger. I typed. Renee replied 3 minutes later, "Good. That means they are scared. Meet me at 10. When I walked into Renee's office, she had the letter spread out on her desk like a map of a battlefield. She looked energized. For a lawyer like Renee, a baseless cease and desist letter was like a steak dinner. "This is sloppy," Renee said, tapping the second paragraph. "They accuse you of soliciting the logistics account on Tuesday, but we have the timeline showing the client contacted you after they received the termination notice. The causation is reversed. They are throwing spaghetti at the wall," I said. "They are trying to bankrupt you with legal fees before you can even start your new job," Renee corrected. "They want you to settle. They want you to agree to a year-long ban just to make this go away." She sat back in her chair and steepled her fingers. "We are not going to settle. Emery, we are going to escalate." "How?" "We are going to reply with a request for evidence," Renee said. "We will ask them to produce the specific communications where you solicited the business. We know those don't exist. But more importantly, we are going to remind them that if they file a lawsuit, we enter the discovery phase." Discovery. The magic word. In a lawsuit, both sides have to show their cards, emails, Slack messages, internal memos. Everything becomes public record. "I have a folder," I said quietly. "I call it the receipts." Renee raised an eyebrow. "Tell me." "I have emails from 6 months ago where I warned Veronica that cutting the support staff would violate the service-level agreements for the healthcare client." She replied saying, "Let legal worry about the SLA. Just cut the cost." I have the logs where she forced us to delay the security patch for the insurance group because she didn't want the downtime to impact the quarterly uptime report. Renee smiled. It was a terrifying smile. "That is not just mismanagement. Emery, that is negligence. If that comes out in discovery, their clients can sue them for fraud." "There is more," I said. My phone buzzed. It was a Signal message, an encrypted app that deleted messages after viewing. It was from Jenna Parkins, a 24-year-old support analyst still trapped inside Meridian Crest. Jenna was smart, loyal, and currently watching her department implode. I read the message out loud. "Veronica is in the system right now. She is editing the CRM opportunities. She is changing the churn risk status on the education and manufacturing accounts from high to low. She is also backdating the notes to make it look like Cameron had meetings he never had." Renee stopped smiling. She leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "Are you sure?" "Jenna sees the audit logs," I said. "Veronica is cooking the books. She is trying to hide the bleeding from the board of directors before the quarterly meeting next week. If the board sees that 3 major clients are about to walk, Veronica is finished. So she is digitally altering reality." "That is material misrepresentation," Renee said softly. "If Meridian Crest is a public company, or if they have private equity investors, that is a felony. It is securities fraud." Renee grabbed her notepad and began drafting our response. "We are not going to mention the fraud explicitly," she said. "We don't want to tip her off to delete the logs. We are just going to hint at it. We are going to write a letter that says Ms. Flores denies all allegations. However, should Meridian Crest choose to pursue this matter in court, we will vigorously request full discovery of all internal CRM audit logs, email communications regarding SLA compliance, and metadata changes to account statuses from the last 30 days to prove that the client departures were due to internal mismanagement, not solicitation." It was a polite way of saying, "We know what you are doing, and if you sue us, we will show the police." "Send it," I said. We sent the letter at noon. By 2 in the afternoon, the atmosphere shifted. Meridian Crest's legal team went silent. The blustering threats stopped. The demand for my laptop vanished. They had read the phrase CRM audit logs and realized they were standing on a landmine. But while the lawyers were playing poker, the clients were playing hardball. I was sitting in a taxi, heading to the Harbor Gray office to sign my partnership paperwork, when the biggest twist of the day landed. It involved the largest account on the roster, the Midwest Healthcare Network. This was the client worth nearly $50 million over the contract lifetime. They were conservative, slow-moving, and notoriously risk-averse. I had assumed they would stay with Meridian Crest simply because moving was too much paperwork. I thought they would suffer through Cameron's incompetence for a year before making a change. I was wrong. The chairwoman of the board for the healthcare network did not email Veronica. She did not email Cameron. She sent a formal letter directly to the board of directors of Meridian Crest Partners. And because the corporate world is a sieve, a copy of that letter found its way to David Aris, my new boss at Harbor Gray, within hours. David handed me the printout when I walked into his office. "You need to read this," he said. "I have never seen a client do this in 20 years. I read the letter. To the board of directors. Meridian Crest Partners. For the past 7 years, our relationship with your firm has been predicated on the operational stability provided by your strategic account leadership. The sudden termination of Ms. Emery Flores, followed by the immediate degradation of service quality we have experienced in the last 96 hours, has created an unacceptable risk profile for our patient data. Let us be unequivocal. We do not have a contract with Meridian Crest, the entity. We have a covenant of trust with the team that manages our infrastructure. That team has been dismantled. Therefore, we are notifying you of our intent to invoke the change of control termination clause effective immediately, unless the original service standard specifically. The leadership of Ms. Flores is restored. Since you cannot restore it, consider this our 30-day notice. We will be transferring our portfolio to a partner who prioritizes continuity over cost-cutting. I lowered the paper. They went over her head, I said. They went straight to the board. They just fired Veronica, David said. She just doesn't know it yet. The board will get this letter. Look at the revenue impact. Look at the legal threats you sent, and realize that one woman's ego is costing them $50 million. Veronica will try to spin it, I said. She will tell them I sabotaged the relationship. She can't, David pointed out. Not with that letter. The client explicitly says the service degraded after you left. They are validating your competence and condemning her decision in the same paragraph. My phone buzzed again. It was another text from Jenna. Emergency board meeting just called for tomorrow morning. Veronica is screaming at the IT director to wipe her hard drive. IT director refused and locked her office door. I looked out the window at the Chicago skyline. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the city. Veronica had tried to use the law as a weapon to silence me. She had sent the cease and desist to scare me into submission. But she had forgotten the most basic rule of a street fight: never pull a knife if your opponent is holding a gun. And I wasn't holding a gun. I was holding the truth. What do we do now? David asked. We wait, I said. We don't have to solicit anyone. David, the healthcare network just told the Meridian board they are leaving tomorrow. The logistics client will do the same. By Friday, the insurance group will follow. The cease and desist, David asked. Dead in the water, I said. If they sue me now, after the clients have explicitly stated their reasons for leaving in writing, it is malicious prosecution. Renee will eat them alive. I picked up the cease and desist letter from my bag and dropped it into the shredder by David's desk. The machine whirred, chewing the heavy cream-colored paper into confetti. The more she threatens me, I said, watching the paper disappear. The faster they run. She is making my sales pitch for me, and I haven't even printed business cards yet. The counterattack was complete. I hadn't fired a single shot. I had just held up a mirror, and Veronica Slade was finally seeing her own reflection. And it was ugly enough to scare away $220 million. The collapse of Meridian Crest Partners did not happen over a quarter or a fiscal year. It happened in 72 hours. It was a rapid, violent decompression. The kind you see in movies when a window blows out of an airplane at 30,000 feet. It began with the logistics giant. At 9 in the morning on Thursday, their legal counsel uploaded a document to the shared secure portal. It was not a request for a meeting. It was a formal notification of termination for cause. The specific language they used was material adverse change in service leadership. They cited Clause 9.1, the very clause I had helped them write. They argued that by removing the designated key person without a 30-day transition period, Meridian Crest had effectively abandoned the contract. They were not just leaving, they were demanding a refund of the prepaid service fees for the remainder of the year. That was $4 million in cash that Meridian would have to wire back. Veronica Slade tried to stop the bleeding. She ordered legal to file an injunction. She claimed the contract was binding regardless of personnel, but while she was fighting the logistics giant on the front lawn, the back door was being kicked in by clients 2 and 3. The Midwest Healthcare Network and the manufacturing group took a different approach. They did not want to terminate immediately. They wanted to move. They sent a joint request for novation, a legal mechanism to transfer their existing contracts from Meridian Crest to Harbor Gray Advisory. They basically said, "We like the software, but we want Harbor Gray to manage it." It was a humiliation. They were asking Meridian to voluntarily hand over their revenue to their biggest competitor. Veronica refused. Of course. She replied with a scathing email stating that Meridian Crest does not assign contracts to competitors and that the clients were bound by the exclusivity terms of their agreements. The response from the healthcare network came 12 minutes later. "If you will not allow us to transfer, then we will not renew. We are issuing a stop work order effective immediately. We would rather pay the early termination penalty than risk our data with your current team." They were willing to pay to get away from her. That was the moment the panic shifted from the executive floor to the board of directors. You have to understand something about the business of enterprise consulting. The money is important. Yes, $220 million is a lot of revenue, but in this industry, revenue is a lagging indicator. The leading indicator is reputation. These 14 clients were not just bank accounts, they were reference logos. When Meridian Crest pitched to a new client, say, a bank in New York or a retailer in Texas, the first slide in their deck was always a collage of logos. Trusted by the Midwest Healthcare Network, partnered with the logistics giant. Those logos were the social proof that allowed Meridian to charge $500 an hour. By Friday morning, those logos were not just leaving, they were becoming hostile witnesses. If a prospective client called the logistics giant for a reference check today, they would hear a horror story. The value of the Meridian Crest brand was evaporating by the hour. The emergency board meeting was called for Friday afternoon. I was not there, obviously, but in a company that is hemorrhaging, loyalty disappears. People start looking for lifeboats, and they start leaking information to the person who built the lifeboats. Jenna Parkins, the young support analyst, was my eyes and ears. She was sitting in the anteroom, ostensibly to provide technical support for the projector, but really to witness the execution. According to Jenna, Veronica walked into the boardroom looking like she hadn't slept in 3 days. Her perfect hair was slightly frayed. Her sharp, predatory eyes were rimmed with red. She opened the meeting by going on the offensive. "This is a coordinated attack," Veronica told the board members. "Emery Flores has stolen our proprietary data. She is actively poaching our clients in violation of her non-solicit agreement. The revenue dip is temporary. We just need to enforce our legal rights and lock these clients down." She was spinning a tale of corporate espionage. She was painting me as the villain who had seduced the innocent clients away from the righteous path of Meridian Crest. The chairman of the board, a man named Arthur Sterling, who had founded the company 20 years ago, let her finish. He sat at the head of the table, staring at the termination letters spread out before him. "Veronica," Arthur said quietly, "you fired her on Monday. Today is Friday. In 4 days, We have lost 30% of our annual recurring revenue. Because she sabotaged the relationships, Veronica insisted. She poisoned the well before she left. Did she? Arthur picked up a piece of paper. I have a letter here from the insurance group. They say they are leaving because their executive review on Tuesday was handled by, and I quote, an incompetent junior associate who lied about the product roadmap. Veronica froze. That is a misunderstanding. Cameron Voss is still learning the... Stop, Arthur said. He looked at her with genuine curiosity. I have a question. Veronica, you told us Emery Flores was overhead. You told us she was just support staff. You said she was easily replaceable. She is, Veronica said, though her voice wavered. She is just an account manager. Then explain this to me, Arthur said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. If she was nobody, why did the clients follow her if the value is in the company, as you claim? Why did the revenue walk out the door the moment she did? The room went silent. It was the question that exposed the entire lie of Veronica's philosophy. She believed the system was the asset. The market was telling her the person was the asset. They are confused, Veronica stammered. Change is hard for legacy clients. We just need to hold the line. We cannot hold the line, another board member spoke up, because we have been caught lying. The board member pressed a button on the conference phone. Play it, she said. It was the recording from the insurance group call, the one where Cameron lied about the HIPAA compliance features. The audio filled the room. Client. Can you confirm the masking feature will be live by January 1st? Cameron, absolutely. We are on track for a January 1st deployment. The board member stopped the recording. We checked with engineering, she said. That code does not exist. That is fraud. Veronica. You put an untrained employee in front of a federal compliance officer and allowed him to make false statements to save a deal. That exposes this firm to liability that exceeds the value of the contract. Veronica looked at Cameron, who was sitting in the corner, pale and sweating. She opened her mouth to throw him under the bus, to claim he went rogue. But before she could speak, the door to the boardroom opened. It was the CEO's executive assistant. She looked terrified. She was holding a single envelope. It was thick, creamy paper, handwritten. I am sorry to interrupt, she whispered, but a courier just delivered this. It is from the founder of the Global Retail Consortium. The room went cold. The Global Retail Consortium, client number 14. They were the quiet giant. They were the account that never complained, never called, just paid their $50 million invoice every year like clockwork. They were the bedrock of the company. I had managed that account for a decade, mostly by having coffee with their founder once a quarter and never sending him a slide deck. Veronica looked at the envelope. She knew, just as everyone else knew, that modern corporations do not send handwritten letters, unless it is personal, unless it is final. Arthur Sterling took the envelope. He opened it with a silver letter opener. The sound of the paper tearing was the only noise in the room. He read it silently. Then he closed his eyes. Read it, the female board member demanded. Arthur cleared his throat. Dear Arthur, 12 years ago, I signed with Meridian Crest because you promised me that you understood the value of a handshake. Over the last decade, the only person in your building who honored that promise was Emery Flores. I learned this morning that she was escorted out of your building like a criminal. I also learned that she refused to ask me for my business because she wanted to honor her contract with you. That is the kind of integrity I buy. That is the kind of character I support. If she is not good enough for Meridian Crest, then Meridian Crest is not good enough for us. We are ending this relationship effective immediately. Do not send a lawyer. Do not send a counteroffer. Send me the final invoice. Arthur dropped the letter on the table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped right in front of Veronica. Client number 14, Arthur said. $50 million? Gone. Not because of a price dispute, not because of a software bug, but because we insulted the person they respected. Veronica stared at the handwriting. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably now. The narrative she had built, the story of the efficient executive trimming the fat, had collapsed. She looked up at the board. She saw the anger in their eyes, but worse than anger, she saw the realization. They realized that she was the liability. "I can fix this," Veronica whispered. "I can call them. I can offer a discount." "You don't get it," Arthur said, his voice tired. "You cannot discount your way out of an insult. You tried to axe her, Veronica. You tried to cut her out of the system to save a few dollars." He gestured to the empty space where the revenue used to be. "You didn't understand what you were cutting. You thought she was a branch. It turns out she was the root." My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from David Aris at Harbor Gray. "The Global Retail Consortium just called the main switchboard. They want to know if you have an office yet." I smiled. I was sitting in my living room, wearing sweatpants, watching the rain fall on Chicago. I had been fired 5 days ago. I had been threatened, sued, and slandered. And yet, across town, in the most expensive boardroom in the city, the most powerful people in the industry were staring at a handwritten letter and realizing that the woman they fired had just walked away with the foundation of their company in her pocket. The exodus was complete. The building was burning, and Veronica Slade was standing in the center of the flames, holding a bucket of gasoline she had mistaken for water. The summons to the negotiation table arrived not as a legal threat, but as an Outlook calendar invitation titled Confidential Settlement Conference. It was scheduled for Monday morning at 10 o'clock in the same glass-walled boardroom where Veronica had fired me just 2 weeks prior. They wanted a ceasefire. They wanted to stop the bleeding. I walked into the lobby of Meridian Crest Partners, but this time I did not swipe a badge. I signed in as a visitor. I was flanked on my left by Renee Whitman, my employment attorney who looked ready to dissect a witness, and on my right by David Aris, the managing partner of Harbor Gray Advisory. We were not just a legal team. We were a raiding party. The boardroom was tense. Arthur Sterling, the chairman of the board, sat at the head of the table. To his right was the company's general counsel, a man named Miller who looked like he had not slept in a week, and in the corner, looking diminished and pale, sat Veronica Slade. There were no pleasantries. "Let us be direct," Miller began, opening a thick file folder. "Meridian Crest is prepared to offer a standstill agreement. We will agree not to pursue the solicitation lawsuit if Ms. Flores agrees to return the 14 client accounts she has unlawfully diverted and adheres to a strict 2-year non-compete clause. We will also require a public statement acknowledging that the clients belong to Meridian Crest." Renee laughed. It was a short, sharp sound that echoed off the glass walls. "Mr. Miller," Renee said, leaning back in her chair, "you are negotiating as if you have leverage. You do not have leverage. You have a crime scene." "We have a binding contract," Miller snapped. "You have a fraudulent termination." Renee countered. She slid a single flash drive across the table. "And more importantly, you have a discovery problem." Arthur Sterling leaned forward. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, speaking for the first time, "that if you sue me, we go to court. And if we go to court, my lawyer is going to subpoena the audit logs of your customer relationship management system for the last 30 days. I looked directly at Veronica. She flinched. "We know you altered the records, Veronica," I said calmly. "We know you changed the churn risk status on the education and manufacturing accounts to hide the danger from the board. We know you backdated meeting notes for Cameron to make it look like he was doing his job. That is not just bad management, that is securities fraud. You manipulated internal data to protect your bonus." The room went deathly silent. Arthur Sterling turned slowly to look at Veronica. "Is this true?" Arthur asked. His voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of a guillotine. "I was optimizing the data," Veronica stammered, her voice shrill. "I was cleaning up the records. Emory is trying to twist standard procedure into... Standard procedure does not involve overwriting server logs at 2 a.m, I interrupted. "We have the timestamps. Arthur, if we go to discovery, The SEC gets those logs. Do you really want federal regulators asking why your revenue director is cooking the books? Arthur looked at Miller. Miller closed his file folder. The legal threat was dead. They could not sue me without exposing themselves to a federal investigation. What do you want? Arthur asked. He sounded tired. He sounded like a man who realized he had backed the wrong horse and lost a fortune. I placed a single sheet of paper on the table. I want a full and unconditional release from my non-compete and non-solicitation agreements. I said, I want a formal letter from Meridian Crest confirming that I did not violate any company policies and that my departure was a mutual separation. I want my full severance paid out immediately, plus the vesting of all my stock options that you tried to cancel. That is extortion, Veronica hissed. She is stealing our business. She is a traitor. No, a board member at the end of the table spoke up. She was the one who had listened to the tape of Cameron lying to the insurance client. She is not a traitor, Veronica. She is just taking back what she brought in. She is an employee, Veronica yelled, standing up. We own her work. We own those relationships. You own the contracts, I said, standing up to meet her gaze. But you do not own the trust. You axed me because you thought I was a cost center. You didn't realize that I was the only reason those clients were signing the checks. I turned to Arthur. Here's the reality. Arthur, those 14 clients are gone. They have already submitted their termination letters. They are not coming back to Meridian Crest, regardless of what happens in this room. The only question is whether they come to Harbor Gray quietly, or if we drag this out in a public legal battle that destroys your stock price. Arthur looked at the timeline I had provided. He looked at the letters from the clients' letters that explicitly stated they were leaving because of Veronica's leadership, not my solicitation. He picked up his pen. Draft the settlement, Arthur said to Miller. Arthur, you can't. Veronica shrieked. Sit down. Veronica, Arthur said. His voice was cold steel. And then pack your things. You are relieved of your duties effective immediately. What? Veronica went white. You lied to the board, Arthur said. You falsified records, and you cost us $220 million in guaranteed revenue because your ego couldn't handle a subordinate being more valuable than you. You are fired for cause. Veronica looked around the room for an ally. She found none. The board members refused to meet her eyes. Cameron Voss, who wasn't even important enough to be invited to this meeting, was presumably already clearing out his desk downstairs. Miller drafted the agreement on the spot. It took 20 minutes. I read it carefully. Full release of claims, acknowledgement of no wrongdoing, immediate payment of severance and stock. I signed it. Arthur Sterling signed it. I hope you are happy, Arthur said as he handed me the copy. You have gutted this firm. I didn't gut it, Arthur, I said, putting the paper in my bag. I just turned on the lights. You were the ones who let the rot set in. I walked out of the boardroom. I walked past Veronica, who was slumped in her chair, staring blankly at the wall. The queen of a ruined kingdom. I took the elevator down to the lobby with Renee and David. We walked out through the revolving doors and into the crisp Chicago air. The sun was shining. It was the first time in 2 weeks that the wind didn't feel cold. My phone rang. It was a number I recognized instantly. It was the private line of the founder of the Global Retail Consortium client number 14. The biggest one. The one that Veronica thought was safe until the bitter end. Hello? I answered. Emery, the voice on the other end said. My legal team just finished reviewing the paperwork with Harbor Gray. We are ready to sign. We are bringing the entire $50 million portfolio over to you. Thank you, I said. We are ready for you. I heard about the settlement, he added. I assume you are free to work with us officially now. I am, I said, officially and legally. Good, he said. We never doubted you for a second. I hung up. I looked at David. That was the last one. 14 out of 14. David smiled. $220 million. Welcome to Harbor Gray. Partner. I turned back to look at the Meridian Crest Tower one last time. It was a monolith of steel and glass, designed to look imposing, designed to look permanent. Inside, people like Veronica believed that the building gave them power. They believed that the corporation was the master and the people were just gears. They were wrong. They had tried to cut me down. They thought that if they swung the axe hard enough, I would fall and wither away. They axed me, I whispered to myself, watching the sun reflect off the windows of the office I used to occupy. But they forgot the most important rule of nature. You can chop down the tree, but if you don't dig up the ground, the person who holds the roots holds the life. I turned my back on the tower and walked toward the train station. I had a lot of work to do. After all, I had 14 implementation plans to rewrite, and for the first time in 12 years, I was going to get paid exactly what I was worth. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below with your location. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed seeing justice served cold, please make sure to subscribe to the Boss Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach more people who need a reminder that sometimes the good guys win.